you doing? Waking up, shaking yesterday's blues, yeah. Turn the TV off, cause bad news, man.
Welcome to The Sports Show. Good morning and welcome to The Sports Show here on Lake Effect Radio and streaming live at lakeeffectradio.org/studio. I'm your host, Ryan Kirby. We have a great show for you guys this morning. We will be talking about college football and the NFL and so much more. But before we start talking about college football, I want to let everybody who is listening either in Breakers or at home know that you can join the conversation by tweeting at me at Ryan_Kirby19 on Twitter, or you can call into the show at 440-940-6615. But first, I want to talk about a local football star. Andy Isabella, he's a Mayfield grad, showed up on homecoming weekend at UMass with his best performance of the season as his 303 receiving yards broke the UMass single-game record set back in 2008 by former Giants wide receiver Victor Cruz. This propelled the UMass Minutemen to a 62-59 win over Liberty in triple overtime. I mean, to break the receiving record, the single game receiving record on homecoming weekend, that's got to be special for him. To win that, I mean, you think about, probably all of his family and friends were there to see that. Very special moment for him. Kudos to him. I actually am a Mayfield grad, so I know I've seen this kid play. This kid's a heck of a football player. So I wish him all the best. Now I want to talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide as they beat LSU. Alabama beat LSU at LSU 29-0. Tua Tagovailoa went 25 of 42 for 295 yards and 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Bama running back Damian Harris had 19 carries for 107 yards and a touchdown. Now also, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish beat Northwestern 31-21. Notre Dame quarterback Ian Book went 22 of 34 for 343 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now I want to talk specifically about the Alabama game because this game had playoff implications all over it, because if LSU were to have beaten Bama, there would have been a shakeup at number 1. But when you look at Tua Tagovailoa, I mean, he threw his first interception of the season against LSU. I mean, you look at that, but you also see how I mean, they are getting close. They are getting close to that. To the conference championship week. And for him to throw his first interception in a big game, I mean, but they still won. I mean, and then he was actually hurt in the game. Early in the game, there was a flag that was thrown, but they didn't. You couldn't hear the whistles because of how loud the stadium was. So Philo ended up getting hit, but they didn't throw a flag for it. So, but I mean, when you look at this game specifically. Alabama didn't end up winning. They will be facing Georgia in the SEC championship game come December. So that's all set. But, I mean, you look at how LSU has played. They beat Georgia handily. I mean, they hung with Bama for a little bit for the first quarter, ish. And, I mean, they were hanging with these good teams. I mean, it's surprising everybody to see LSU hanging with, Alabama. They beat Georgia. I mean, and to see how good the coaching staff is at LSU, I mean, you've got Ed Orgeron coaching LSU. Les Miles is no longer there. So, I mean, that wasn't also a big switch. Les Miles had been there for so long. But to see Ed Orgeron come in and just turn the program around, I mean, as I said before, beating Georgia handily at home. Hanging with Alabama for a quarter or two, if you want to think about it throughout the game. But, I mean, it all goes to show that, you can, these programs, I mean, you see these programs, have bad years and then they bring in a new head coach and it's like the sky's the limit for them. Like they are playing outstanding. But, I mean, LSU is in is in the toughest conference in college football, so you can't discount that. But I want to talk about Notre Dame as they stay unbeaten, beating Northwestern 31-21. As I said before, Ian Book went 22 of 34 for 343 yards and 2 touchdowns. Notre Dame, they are them and Alabama and Clemson are the only in the top four. You have Alabama, Clemson, and Notre Dame are the only three remaining unbeaten teams in the college football playoffs. So, I mean, you look at that and how good, they are. I mean, it really goes to show, there are three teams in the top four that are unbeaten. I mean, if you want to include UCF, they did end up beating Temple. But, I mean, with all that being said, I mean, it goes a long way to see how good these teams, truly are. And to see how good they can, UCF did almost lose to Temple. But, I mean, come tomorrow night, we'll see what the standings look like, come tomorrow night, and we'll see how that all shapes out. But the only three remaining unbeaten teams. Four if you want to count UCF at 7-0. But Alabama, Clemson, and Notre Dame are the only three remaining unbeaten teams in the top four. I mean you look at the LSU. They do now have two losses. One to who was it? I know they had a loss. Wait a minute, let's see here. Yeah, because they lost to, let's see here. Yeah, they lost to Florida. Yeah, Florida and Alabama so LSU is a two-loss team. So come tomorrow night, we may see LSU drop out of that top four spot or out of that 3 spot. I mean, but you look at you look at these rankings, and I could very easily see them putting Notre Dame at 3, and then bringing up, I said it last week on the show, but bringing up, I know UCF doesn't have that great of a schedule, but bringing up UCF and putting them in the top 4, because in my opinion, they deserve a playoff spot, given what they did to Auburn last year in the Chick-fil-A Bowl. They definitely deserve that spot because, I get, strength of schedule. I get that. But when you're beating teams and you're on this big winning streak, I mean, I think the last time I saw a long winning streak like this, and I'm going to go there, was UConn women's basketball. But to see this with UCF, I mean, these smaller schools are coming up. I mean, I get UCF; they're a Power 5 school. They're a Power 5 school, I believe. I mean, they should be getting high praise. I mean, they're 7-0, but I mean, they're hanging with they're up there with Alabama, Clemson, and Notre Dame, all unbeaten. Now I get Alabama and Clemson and Notre Dame, they have tough schedules. I get that. But, you look at everything that has gone on, UCF did have Shaquem Griffin, who's a great linebacker now with the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, they had a great defense there with UCF, but, you look at their offense and how good Mackenzie Milton has been, throwing the ball, running the ball. I mean, he has just been so good, throughout the year. I mean, I get, the win against Temple was pretty close because Temple did hang with them. I mean, I think at one point, UCF was actually trailing at one point. But, I mean, yeah, they were trailing at the beginning of the first quarter, and then they were down. Oh, wait a minute. No, they were down. Yeah, they were down. I mean, part of the game. So they ended up winning actually 52-40. So they are now 8-0. So, I mean, I'm going to keep saying this over and over again. The committee needs to look at teams like UCF and say, are they worthy of getting into the playoffs? Because in my opinion, you could take Alabama or LSU out, and put in UCF. So here's my prediction for the top 4, and mark my words on this one. Alabama, Clemson, Notre Dame, UCF. All unbeaten teams. Because if they keep a 2-loss LSU team in there, there's something wrong. Because if you have a 2-loss team, they have 2 losses. They're in my opinion, they're not worthy of having a playoff spot. Unless they can somehow, unless they can win another great game. But if they can't win another statement game, then they don't deserve to be in the playoff. But I get it. People are going to say, "Oh, UCF, as I said before, they don't have a good strength of schedule. They don't have this. They don't have that. So what? Look at their record. They're 8-0. They went undefeated last year. People need to start thinking about UCF and how good they are, because they beat Auburn last year. Granted, that was last year, but still, they beat Auburn. Auburn, a team in the SEC. But I mean, people are, as I said before, people are gonna say, well, they don't have good strength of schedule, this and that. To be honest, strength of schedule doesn't show how good a team is. That just shows that they have tough competition. I mean, you look at Alabama's schedule, the first couple games of the season. They're facing teams, like nobody teams. I mean, the first game was against Louisville. Okay, that was a great matchup. But then you go on and you face Arkansas State. I'd call that a no-name school. Ole Miss, okay, that was still a blot. Louisiana Lafayette, I'd call that a no-name school. I mean, and then they have to face the Citadel before the game against Auburn. And then you look at the UCF schedule, and as I said before, people are going to say, oh, they don't have a good strength of schedule. Their conference is a very good conference. I mean, let's see, so they beat, so they're 8-0. They beat UConn. They beat South Carolina State. Okay, that's nothing. They beat Florida Atlantic. Okay. Here's a statement win for you. They beat Pittsburgh 45-14. 45-14. Pittsburgh almost beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame's one of the unbeaten teams. One of the remaining unbeatens. You look at that game and you see, oh, they actually beat a team that almost beat an undefeated Notre Dame team. Isn't that considered a statement win? I mean, so they went and beat SMU, they went and beat Memphis, they went and beat East Carolina, and they beat Temple. But when you look at the game against Pittsburgh, I'm going to say this again, isn't that a statement win? Beating an ACC school, 45-14? I mean, you look at that and you say, wait a minute. I'm going to say this again. I get it. That's one of their toughest games. The rest of their games are, can be blowouts. But, I mean, it doesn't make you wonder, they've hung with the best teams in the country. Pittsburgh is a good football team. UCF hung with Auburn last year. I get, that's last year, but still. That shows how the whole program has grown. They beat Auburn last year. They beat Pittsburgh this year, 45-14. But, as I said before, there are two sides to this. They don't have a good strength of schedule. Their toughest game is against Pittsburgh. But, the committee, in my opinion, I don't think any of you guys want to see a 2-loss team in the playoff, because that would just be unfair to the other schools who are unbeaten. I get, some of these other unbeaten teams are, schools that don't have a good strength of schedule. But the committee needs to go past that and look at performance. Do they have any statement wins? Like games that they've won against against a Power 5 team. UCF being one of them, beating Pittsburgh. So, the committee needs to stop focusing on, strength of schedule and, over-unders and this and that. They need to focus on, do these schools have statement wins on their schedule? Have they beaten Power 5 conference teams? I'd say by a margin of 14 points, if not 20 points. Because, if you look at UCF, they're perfect for the playoff. They beat Pittsburgh badly. They beat them handily, 45-14. Isn't that a statement to you that, isn't that like the green light saying, oh, maybe we should include UCF in the playoff? So we'll find out Tuesday night what the rankings, how the rankings will shape up for this week, for this coming week. Also, Ohio State beat Nebraska 36-31. That was a close game. So as I said before, Ohio State beat Nebraska 36-31. Dwayne Haskins went 18 of 32 for 252 yards, 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. J.K. Dobbins added 23 carries for 163 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, I mean, that is a good win for Ohio State, but I mean, Nebraska, they're 2-6. They're 2-7 now, but you know, they were 2-6 team coming in. In my opinion, Ohio State should have blown them out. But I mean, Ohio State had their hiccups during the game, so we'll see what happens next week. As Ohio State, I believe, will take on Michigan State next week. Yeah, it's going to be at Michigan State, so that should be a heck of a game to watch. And then Ohio State will be at Maryland, and then they finish out the year at home against Michigan in the rivalry game. So, I mean, you look at this Ohio State team, and you look at where they're ranked. You know, they are ranked 10th. You know, right now. I mean, they could be easily ranked in the top 5 come tomorrow night. But I mean, their only loss, and granted, it was a bad loss to Purdue. But I mean, this all goes to show the committee. I get where the committee's coming from, you know, strength of schedule and that whole thing. But I'm gonna keep going back to UCF. When you look at a team like UCF and, you know, Ohio State, you know, they are a great football program. They have a great program. They got a good team. If you want to include a one-loss team, go for it. But I would be shocked if they included LSU as a 2-loss team, because that would just be you'd be getting people complaining about that left and right. Because in my opinion, a 2-loss team should be immediately eliminated from playoff contention, period. Because if you're not either undefeated or have one loss, you shouldn't be considered for the playoff. So, I mean, we'll see how it shapes up come Tuesday night. So here's an updated. So here's the AP poll, not the college football playoff rankings. The updated AP poll. So they have Alabama at 1, Clemson at 2, Notre Dame at 3, and a 1-loss Michigan team at 4. Okay, I could see that. No, LSU drops to 9 at 7 and 2. Okay, so when you look at that, and also, you know, UCF they only go up 1 ranking. They go from 12 to 11. Now that, in my opinion, that's wrong, because you look at the highest 2-loss team in the standings right now is LSU at number 9. In my opinion, LSU should have dropped below UCF. But maybe the playoffs see something that we don't. So, I mean, we'll see what happens with that. We'll definitely keep you guys up to date on the rankings and how they shape up, you know, for this week. And then we'll also preview the Michigan State game next week, or on Wednesday. So, I mean, there were a couple big games that, you know, were statement games for teams this week, and you know, they came out and they did what they needed to do. Alabama beat LSU, Notre Dame beat Northwestern, Ohio State beat Nebraska, and Clemson beat Louisville handily. So we'll see what happens with that. So coming up after the break, we'll talk about the Cleveland Browns in their first game with Greg Williams as the interim head coach. We'll recap the game, and also we'll talk about last night's epic Sunday Night Football game between the Packers and Patriots. So you're listening to the Sports Radio Show here on Lake Effect Radio and streaming live at lakeeffectradio.org/studio.
You're listening to Lakeland's Lake Effect Radio, the official home of Lakeland Sports. If you want to watch or listen, you can tune to lakeeffectradio.org/sports.
Here comes Anna Williams. Williams over to Brianna Williams. Williams finds some daylight, kicks over to Cannon. Cannon puts it up. Missed it, rebound. Kerry Morin puts it up. It's good. Again, Kerry Morin. It is alive and well. Kerry Morin here at Lakeland Community College.
Cruz bump, smart set, Morin the spike, and
English on there.
Yep, Morin with a lovely kill there.
You're listening to Lakeland's Lake Effect Radio, the official home of Lakeland sports.
And we welcome you back to the Sports Radio Show here on Lake Effect Radio and streaming live at lakeeffectradio.org/studio. Now, just a reminder for you guys who missed the beginning, if you want to join the conversation, you can tweet at me at Ryan_Kirby19 on Twitter. And also you can call in to the show at 440-940-6615. So I want to talk about those Cleveland Browns as they lost to the Kansas City Chiefs 37-21. Baker Mayfield went 29 of 42 for 297 yards and 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Nick Chubb added 22 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown. On the other side, Chiefs quarterback Patrick Mahomes went 23 of 32 for 375 yards and 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. Willoughby South grad Kareem Hunt added 17 carries for 91 yards and 2 touchdowns. Cleveland Heights High School grad Travis Kelce had 7 receptions for 99 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I want to look at this game because this was the first game with Greg Williams, as the interim head coach for the Cleveland Browns. They were very aggressive in the first half. Going for it on fourth downs, going for 2-point conversions. Actually, the first scoring touchdown the Browns had, they tried to go for 2 and did not get it. So, if this is if this is a good fit for the Browns, having Greg Williams as the head coach, great, because when Hugh Jackson was there and when Todd Haley was there, you didn't see that in the first quarter. You didn't, or in the first half, you didn't see the the aggressiveness, going for it on fourth down or going for 2 after a touchdown. But you see that out of Greg Williams, and you see that aggressiveness out of him. It shows a lot when you think about it. Granted, the Browns ended up not getting the win, but they hung. They didn't. They hung with the Chiefs for a little bit. They were only down by. It was 21-15 in the start of the third quarter. They were in striking distance with the Chiefs, but that's one thing the Browns, definitely have to work on is not choking in the second half, because when you look at from the first half to the second half, the Browns were very good in the first half, and then come second half they dropped. And I feel like that's what it's going to be. That's how it's going to be for the rest of the year. And hopefully that's not the case. But we'll see what happens with how the Browns will analyze Greg Williams and how he did this week, and preparing the guys for the game. And we'll see what happens. So the Browns will take on the Falcons next Sunday at 1:00. So they got another tough test facing the Atlanta Falcons. So but when you look at the Chiefs game, the Browns, the one thing the Browns need to definitely work on is holding quarterbacks, because you look at Patrick Mahomes, he went 23 of 32 for 375 yards and 3 touchdowns and one interception. That does not prove that you can be a winning football team if you're going to give a quarterback, or if you're going to give up, if you're going to let the quarterback throw for 375 yards and throw 3 touchdowns and only 1 interception. The 1 interception, okay, that was a good play, but to give up 3 touchdowns, that definitely proves that you can't have a team playing very well, or have a team that they can win games, but yet again they're not finishing the games out. I feel like that's what the Cleveland Browns, they've been their their routine lately is they don't finish the games. They play well in the first in the first half, and then the third quarter starts and they're okay. They're starting to pick up the intensity a little bit, and then all of a sudden it just the other team scores a touchdown, and then all the energy is just taken out of them. So I feel like the Browns, they definitely need to work on that for sure. I know a lot of people are going to say that, but you got to give the Browns a little bit of credit. They didn't get blown out. I think everybody thought, it's going to be, a 35-0, Chiefs win, but 37-21. That's not what we were thinking. I was thinking closer, but at least the Browns didn't, as I said before, at least the Browns didn't get blown out. By a ton. So I mean, there's always that at least factor. So, but I mean, when you look at the local guys that performed, I mean, I know this was for the Chiefs, but you look at Kareem Hunt, 17 carries for 91 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, that must have been special for him to come into Cleveland, knowing that he's from this area and perform at a high level. And then also Travis Kelce, having 7 he's a Cleveland Heights high school grad, having 7 receptions for 99 yards and 2 touchdowns. I mean, you got to give those guys a lot of credit. I mean, they played very well. Patrick Mahomes played very, very, very well. But, I mean, you look at all that. You look at, how the Browns, I mean, Baker had 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. Nick Chubb had a touchdown. I mean, the Browns definitely, I know there's one thing the Browns have to work on, is scoring in the first quarter. You can't, I mean, I know people are probably going to say this, until next week, but the Browns cannot hold for 3 points, when they're in the red zone. They just can't, because, if you're getting 3 points every time, you're not going to win a football game. You're just not. Because, I mean, granted, 3 points is better than nothing, but, to win a football game, you gotta score. I mean, you can't. I mean, field goals, yeah, that's a score, but that's not something teams want to do every time. I mean, look at the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, they were, before John Dorsey went to Kansas City, they were nothing, and then Dorsey came in, and now they're, 8-1. Playing at a high level. I mean, hopefully we can see that out of the Cleveland Browns, over time. But, I mean, you look at all that and you think, okay, the Browns, they are making improvements. But, I know there was one thing that surprised me during the game dearly was they actually brought in Tyrod Taylor in the middle of the fourth quarter because Baker had gotten hurt on a hit that he had taken. So, and Tyrod didn't do anything. So, I mean, the Browns definitely need to get these, these situations cleared up. And, the quarterbacks, in my opinion, Baker, I get everybody, when Baker won the game against the Jets, our first win in, however many days. I mean, everybody was, praising him, saying, oh, he's our savior and this and that. But people need to slow down about that because look what he's doing now. He's looking like another Cleveland Browns quarterback, to be honest with you. I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer, but I mean, it's a true statement. He's looking, 29 of 42 for 297 yards and 2 touchdowns and 1 interception. I mean, that's decent numbers, but it's not winning numbers. So, I mean, and you look at Nick Chubb even, 22 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown. I mean, I get he's a rookie, and I get this is, kind of his warm-up year, if you will. But he's shown us time and time again that he can play at a high level and he can, bust through tacklers very easily. I mean, the only thing I was happy about, and I'll give the officials, I would say the officials, I give them a lot of credit. They officiated the game very well. There weren't any missed calls or, stupid calls that they made that, against the Browns. I mean, they called a fair game. I mean, there's a lot of penalties during the game. I mean, they were on both sides, both teams. I mean, I feel like that's one positive that can come out of the game is that, the officials did their job. They didn't, favor one side or the other. They called the game fair, and that's all you can do. I mean, but hopefully the officials, I think with the NFL firing the official that missed the false start call against the Chargers, firing him, I feel like that was, I would have rather had them fire, there was Ed Hockley, the official who said that Baker was still a runner and therefore allowed to be hitting that. I feel like they should have fired him over the other guy only because of the way the guy worded, not calling a targeting penalty or not calling a penalty or not calling a penalty for targeting. I mean, I feel like that's worse than missing a false start call, to be honest with you, because you look at both calls and you look at the false start call. That was just a false start. The guy moved. Okay. But with the Baker Mayfield hit, he could have been, as I said this a couple weeks ago, he could have been knocked out of the game. And to be honest with you, Tyrod Taylor probably would have started yesterday's game in place of Baker. And you know what? Browns fans would have been chanting Baker's name left and right, saying, "We want Baker." But you know what? The team's got to do what the team's got to do. I mean, you think about that and you think about, a guy's life could have been changed with that hit. I mean, yeah, they fined, Jordan Whitehead, the guy who made the hit on Baker, but they didn't suspend him. They just fined him $26,000. That's like nothing to them. That's like $20 to them because they're making millions. So, but I mean, I'm going to say this again. I feel like that's one positive that did come out of this game, out of the Browns game, was that the officials actually called a good, fair game. I mean, there were flags thrown on both sides, and they made the correct calls, and that's one thing that I think was a plus for the Browns. I mean, Myles Garrett definitely needs to work on how he does his stance, because he was getting called for offsides each time, jumping before the snap, and I mean, the guy's a big time player. He's got a ton of potential. I mean, you think about all that and you see how good the team is, and the defense. Losing Denzel Ward, and then having Jabril Peppers come out for a series or two. I mean, the Browns were hurting on the defensive side of the ball. So, I mean, for them to 21 points, that's pretty good, but pretty good isn't enough in my opinion with the way this game came out, 37-21. But I mean, they just that's the fun of being a Browns fan, is that you can as they say, next game you just move on, and then once the season's over, you say, well, maybe next year will be our year. So I mean, it's you talk about, how good, I'm going to say this again, how good Patrick Mahomes is. I mean, look at this guy. I mean, 23 of 32 for 375 yards and 3 touchdowns and 1 interception. I mean, and Myles Garrett did not hit him once. That is, you got to think about that, I know a couple weeks ago people were saying playoffs after the Browns beat the Ravens. But think about it. If we were in the playoffs, we'd have to face the Chiefs. And if we can't handle Patrick Mahomes in a regular season game, think about how he's going to be in the postseason. His talent's going to be extra. I mean, if you think about that, I mean, yeah, this was a regular season game, but think about it. People were saying playoffs a couple weeks ago after the Ravens game. And I'm going to say this again. We'd probably have to face the Chiefs in the playoffs, to be honest with you. And you know what? If we can't handle Patrick Mahomes in a regular season game, how do you think we're going to handle him in a postseason game when the stakes are higher and the intensity is way up? Because to be honest with you, if the Browns actually played decent football, I could very easily see Mahomes with 300 yards passing and 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. I could very easily see that if the Browns defense came up big. But to give up 3 touchdowns, I mean, and for Kareem Hunt to score 2 very easy rushing touchdowns, you got to wonder, what Greg Williams' son is doing with the defense. Because when Greg Williams was the defensive coordinator, the defense looked a heck of a lot better than it did yesterday. A heck of a lot better. But, I mean, it is one game, you can't, it was on a short week, and, you can't fault him for that. But, I mean, you think about all that and you see, okay, she had a short week. He had to bring people in very quickly and get them up to speed on the, on the offense and the defense and that whole thing. But I mean, if you have a whole week, you have a short week. I mean, people are gonna go complain and be like, yeah, he did have a short week, but that's no excuse to give up 3 touchdowns and to not even put any pressure on Patrick Mahomes. I mean, I did not see him run out of the pocket once yesterday. I mean, I think it was maybe once, but that was about it. But when you look at the Browns, their past couple games, they had the quarterback scrambling out of the pocket. But, this game comes and Patrick Mahomes is able to just stand in there a couple times, but at one point he did have to scramble, but most of the time he was able to just stand in the pocket and just stand there for about, 15 seconds and make a throw. To be honest, that shows a good offensive line, to be honest with you. And that's something the Browns lack, is a good offensive line. Because if you think about it, you look at Nick Chubb and 22 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown. I mean, and then for Baker to go 29 to 42 for 297 yards and 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Baker was sacked a couple times too. He was hit a few times. I feel like that's one thing the Browns need to upgrade is their offensive line. They need to go out and get good offensive linemen. If that's in the draft in April, or if that's through free agency, great. But if your running game is good and you can't block very well, your running game's going to be non-existent. And if you're not throwing the ball that much, Baker did have some good throws, don't get me wrong. But the receivers need to work on running their routes better, because you had times where there was double coverage and Baker did make that throw and Landry did make the catch. But that's like a 1 in a million shot of getting picked off. You throw the ball into double coverage. You got to really think about that. But hey, if Baker's going to do that, anything to help the team, in my opinion, if you think about it. But it all goes back to this is great. This was Greg Williams' first game as the interim head coach. So you take it, as they say, you take it one game at a time, and hopefully next week against the Falcons it'll be a better result. But it'll be a tough game they're playing the Browns are at home against the Falcons, so it'll be a good crowd on hand, and if the Browns can get Matt Ryan out of the pocket and have him scrambling, and the defense can cover their guys, 100%, I could see the Browns beating the Falcons. I know everybody's going to say, well, the Falcons are a playoff contender. Yeah, so they're a playoff contender. They're not they did go to the Super Bowl one year. But, they're 4-4, so I really don't see them as a threat to us. But, any team in the NFL is a threat to the Cleveland Browns when you think about it. So, it'll be a tough test, and I guess we'll see where that goes. But, I want to go back to this whole Baker Mayfield. Everybody was, after the 2 wins he had, against the Jets and against Baltimore, everybody was, going crazy about him, saying he's our savior, he's the quarterback of our dream, he's the quarterback that we've been looking for, and this and that. He is the quarterback that we've been looking for, don't get me wrong. But he's not our savior just yet. Because in my opinion, has he won us does he have a Super Bowl ring with us? No. Does he have any proof that he has success here? 2 wins, that's it. Nothing else. To be honest, if the Browns win a Super Bowl with him as the quarterback, that'll prove something. That'll prove that, okay, yes, people could start saying, yes, he is our savior. He is the quarterback of our dreams. He is the quarterback we've been looking for. But when you go in and you lose to, granted, the Chiefs were 7 and they are now 8-1, but they're a great team, and the Browns definitely showed some improvements. Their defense played okay until Denzel Ward went out and Jabril Peppers went out, but I feel like all that discipline falls on Myles Garrett, because if you think about it, he's I call him the field general because he's just so good. Granted, he didn't sack Mahomes yesterday, but if all else fails, you go to him and you ask him, you have him direct the defense on the field, because if you look at the past couple of games, I'm going to say this again, he played very well. He got to the quarterback. He pressured the quarterback. But if you can't win a game, but you can play good defense, good defense on your part. But if you can't win the game, then you got to fix something. But it'll be a good test for the Browns to be facing the Falcons at home, or not at home, meaning here in Cleveland at First Energy Stadium. So we'll see where that one goes. But it'll be interesting to see how the Browns can handle Devontae Freeman and Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. See how they can handle those guys, and if Denzel Ward and the defense can cover those guys and hold them, to under, I'm going to say under 10 points, in my opinion. If the Browns can hold any team to under 10 points, to 10 points or lower, the Browns have a legitimate shot of winning a game. But if they're giving up, like they gave up yesterday, 37 points, you can't give up 37 points in a game and expect to win. The Browns were down, I mean, yeah, they were down 21-15 at the half. I mean, it was a close game at the half, but the second half came around and the Browns, gave up a touchdown. And I mean, you think about all that and you see, the Chiefs, I mean, they're a great football team. I'm going to say this again. Don't get me wrong. They are a great football team. I think they've shocked everybody by playing so well. I mean, now there is one thing I want to talk about is that there are no longer any unbeaten teams in the NFL. The Rams got their first loss yesterday and lost to the Saints. So, I mean, there's something for you. There are no longer any undefeated teams in the NFL. So, I mean, everybody's got their shot. The Browns are now 2-6-1. So, I mean, hopefully the quarterback carousel ends now with Baker Mayfield. Hopefully Baker is, as everybody's saying, the one for us, the one that we were looking for. Hopefully Greg Williams is the coach we've been looking for. Hopefully that coaching carousel starts to wind down a little bit. So, I mean, now you look at all the past Browns head coaches. You look at Mike Pettin. He's now the defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. You look at Pat Shurmur. He is the head coach of the New York Giants. You look at Hugh Jackson now. Who knows where he's going to go? But when you look at all these past head coaches, I mean, they're still very much with the game. I'm going to sit down. Pat Shurmur, head coach of the New York Giants. Mike Pettin is the defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. But I mean, if the Browns, if Greg Williams can win us, if we can have a winning season with him as the head coach, great. Then hire him. Don't make him the interim anymore. That interim should be out of there. He should be the head coach. I mean, granted, this was one game, and I feel like people are saying, they should get rid of him and get someone else. But what if you ask Freddie Kitchens to be the head coach for a game? See what he does. Because you look at Baker's strengths. He can run the ball. He can throw the ball. He can throw on the run. There's not many quarterbacks. I mean, there are some good quarterbacks that can throw on the run, but there's very few young quarterbacks that can throw on the run. I mean, the only one I could think of, or the only two, I could think of, are Patrick Mahomes and Dak Prescott. Other than that, there's really not many, and Sam Darnold, so there's three young quarterbacks that can actually throw on the run. Well, Dak Prescott, he's not really a young guy, but I mean, there's three guys for you, and then Baker Mayfield, and then four if you include Baker Mayfield. So I mean, you look at how Baker's been playing. He has had a couple good games, that did not result in wins. But I mean, if he can throw the ball into double coverage and the receiver can make a catch, I mean, that's fantastic because. I got to say this again. That's like a 1 in a million shot of getting intercepted because the ball could be tipped. It could be, it could be tipped. It could be the defensive player could come in and just rip it out. But if Baker can show what he can do, if Baker can, throw some, if he can have some risky plays, play with that risk. I mean, that's great, as long as the Browns can get wins. But, I mean, if the Browns, if the Browns can't get a win by the end of if they can't get 3 wins by the end of this year, then there's something wrong. And the one thing I do hope for, mark my words, is that Jimmy Haslam does not get involved with the hiring of the new head coach. I hope John Dorsey takes full responsibility for hiring the new head coach because, I think it showed, with Haslam hiring Hugh Jackson that it did not go so well. I mean, you think about, you look at all that and you see, 3-36-1 for Hugh Jackson and he's now out. I mean, I feel like, Hugh Jackson coming in and calling, the offensive plays and being the head coach, I feel like that was a big, an overwhelming experience for him. So I feel like that threw him off a little bit. But you can't, I'm going to say this, I said this last week, it was unacceptable that he only got us, he was 2-36-1 or 3-36-1? Regardless, to have that kind of record, I mean, 36 losses, really? I mean, now there were some talks this morning about the Browns possibly going after Patriots offensive coordinator and John Carroll grad Josh McDaniels, the I mean, there were talks that he may come to Cleveland, but in my opinion, if the Patriots don't get to a Super Bowl this year, I feel like he'll be out. He will be wanting to look at head coaching jobs elsewhere, or looking at coaching jobs elsewhere. Because, you look at Tom Brady, he is 42 years old, so he is getting there. He's getting closer and closer to retirement. So, you look at all of that and you see, well, the Browns could get Josh McDaniels. I mean, he is a great head coach. He did prove he was a good head coach in Denver. He's a great offensive coordinator. I mean, heck, if they keep Greg Williams and put Freddie Kitchens back as the associate head coach and running backs coach, if they, take Freddie Kitchens and put him back as the running backs coach and bring Josh McDaniels in as the offensive coordinator, the Browns, I mean, in my opinion, I could see another, relationship between like Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, but with Baker Mayfield and possibly Josh McDaniels. I could see that. I could see that duo, having good success, because you look at Josh McDaniels. I mean, with the way Tom Brady plays, he really has a limit to what he can run. I mean, with Baker Mayfield, you can throw in a RPO, a run pass option with Baker. You can do that. You can have him run a quarterback sneak, because you won't be all that worried that he'll get hurt. I mean, but when you look at some of these guys like Tom Brady, who's 42, when he runs the ball, everybody's on edge, like, oh no, he's gonna get hurt, he's gonna hurt his leg, or he's gonna hurt his wrist, or this or that. But you look at, I'm gonna say this again, you look at Baker Mayfield. He's a young guy, rookie quarterback. He doesn't have many limitations, in my opinion, as far as play calling, like what plays he's good at running, because he can very easily take a play. I mean, he proved this at Oklahoma. He could take a play that is, that is already busted from the snap, and change it around and make a good play while looking for a guy open. So, I mean, I think everybody would love to see. I know I talked to a couple people on Thursday. Yeah, last Thursday. Everybody was agreeing with me about possibly bringing in Lincoln Riley as the new head coach. But I think Lincoln Riley's already put it out there that he is not interested in coming to the NFL. So, I mean, as Jeremiah was telling me, the Browns are not a good. They don't have a good selling point. You look at the past couple of head coaches; they were out after 2 or 3 years of coaching. The Browns really, I feel like they need to work on that. Is having that selling point of, come coach here and you'll have success, not come coach here and you'll be out in 3 years. You'll be, as Jeremiah put it last week, you'll be canned in 3 years or 2 years. Because if the Browns keep having that mentality of that, there's not going to be another head coach that's going to want to come to Cleveland unless they're promised big money. But even that, promising big money, won't get a big time head coach to Cleveland. I mean, you see that. You see, okay, yeah, after 2.5 years, Hugh Jackson was out. I mean, and he brought us 3 wins. I mean, you think about that and you see that and you're thinking, well, he was here for almost 2 years. I mean, he should have gotten us more wins. But think about it. His first year here, he hardly had a team. The team wasn't even all that good when he first came in. It wasn't like this year where it was a rebuild. It was a rebuilding phase. I mean, so you really can't count that first year. So technically he was here for a year and a half. So, I mean, you look at that and you see it, you forget about that. And you're like, okay, Greg Williams is the head coach. That's it. But hey, I mean, look at Greg Williams. I mean, he showed that. To be honest with you, what I said last week about the Browns coaches showing enthusiasm, he definitely showed it yesterday when the Browns made a good play. He definitely showed it. And that's something the Browns desperately need, is a coach that can have that, that drive and that passion for the game. Like, okay, we made a good play. Let's go and let's, score. Because, I'm going to say this again from last week. You look at Hugh Jackson. He did not show any emotion when the Browns made a good play. I mean, yeah, he maybe did a fist bump, but he didn't go overboard like Greg Williams or Todd Haley. He didn't. I mean, and that shows a lot when you think about it as a head coach. You got to have passion for the game. And, Greg Williams definitely has that, and hopefully the Browns have some success with him going forward. But, I mean, who knows what will happen with the Browns and what they'll be doing come come off season time, and I know we're only in week 8, week 9, but you got to start preparing. Like, okay, what are we gonna do, in the off season? But I mean, I know it's very early, but I don't see the Browns getting to the playoffs anytime. I don't see the Browns getting to the playoffs this year. So I feel like the Browns need to start thinking about, okay, can we, get a good head coach for Baker Mayfield to help him grow as a quarterback and become that, that Drew Brees type quarterback. I mean, there's very little head coaches, very few head coaches out there that are like that. It can that can relate to Baker. I mean, the only one that I could think of is his former college coach Lincoln Riley. That's about it. I mean, but I think Lincoln Riley's already put it out there that he will not be. He does not want to come to the NFL, and he does not want to coach in the NFL. So, he'll be staying put in Oklahoma to build that program. So, I feel like the next guy up will be Josh McDaniels. Can the Browns persuade him to come to Cleveland if the Patriots do not get to another Super Bowl? Because if the Patriots do not get to another Super Bowl, I could very easily see one of two things happening. One, Tom Brady retiring, or two, Josh McDaniels, wanting out of New England, or both. Tom Brady retires and Josh McDaniels wants out of New England. I could see both. I could see one thing happening alone from separate from the other. Or I could see both things happening at the same time. Because you look at Josh McDaniels, he had head coaching offers last year from the Colts and from all these teams, and he turned them all down because he wanted to stay in New England. But then you look at Matt Patricia, who was the former defensive coordinator for the Patriots. He's now in Detroit, and they're playing pretty solid football, I would say. But, I mean, I said this last week on the morning show, interim head coaches, there's something about, Cleveland and interim head coaches. I mean, you look at Larry Drew, got a win as the interim head coach for the Cavs. He had 3 wins last year with the Cavs as the interim. You look at Ryan Day at Ohio State. He had 3 wins as the interim at Ohio State before Urban Meyer came back. I mean, I feel like this is just that step that step in the right direction for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, if they can keep guys, if guys can stay healthy, 1, and 2, if they can play all 4 quarters and not choke towards the end of the third and into the fourth, if they can finish games out, I could see them getting a couple more wins this year. I can't see them going to the playoffs, but I could very easily see them getting a few more wins to put it out there that hey, maybe next year will be the year that we will be a legitimate contender. Because you've seen it over time how the Browns, they play a good, fantastic game one week, and then the next week they just tank the game, and then the following week they play a great game, and then the next week they won't play well. But I mean, if this head coaching change will help anything, great. If it helps something, good. Because I feel like there was time for the Browns to get something new. With putting Greg Williams as the interim. I mean, I feel like that whole interim word, I feel like he doesn't really deserve that word associated with his name, only because, I mean, you think about that and you look at, I mean, I feel like they should actually just hire him as the head coach because, just give it a shot. I mean, you really have nothing to lose. I mean, if you just hire him as the head coach, if you don't say he's the interim. Because if he doesn't have success, then you could very easily just send him somewhere else. But, I mean, it'll depend on how the season ends this year. I mean, if the Browns can get a few more wins this year, I could very easily see a good year next year. I could very easily see a turnaround year like what the Chiefs are going through right now, having that, that turnaround year of just playing incredible football. I could see the Browns doing that next year very easily. I mean, I know this year hasn't ended yet, but still, I feel like Browns fans are starting to talk about, maybe next year, maybe next year will be our year. Because if you look at how Cleveland sports is, I mean, the Cavs had their moment in 2016. The Indians had their moment in 2016. I know it won't relate, but the Monsters had their moment in 2016 winning the Calder Cup. I feel like the Browns are just that, and then the Ohio State had their moment in 2016. Was it 2016? Yeah, 2016 winning the national championship. So I feel like this is just the Browns, I think this is the Browns' turn to have the spotlight, on them and having a good year and playing very well and making it to the playoffs and, possibly raising a trophy. So, I mean, if I think all Browns fans are going to be hoping and praying that the Patriots do not get to another Super Bowl. So, Tom Brady retires and, Josh McDaniels comes to Cleveland and is the head coach and turns our season around, or turns our season around and just takes us to the promised land. But I mean, it'll be a tough game coming up against the Falcons. Now, last but certainly not least, I want to talk about the big Sunday Night Football game. Sunday Night Football matchup featuring the Green Bay Packers and New England Patriots. The Patriots beat the Packers 31-17. Tom Brady went 22 of 35 for 294 yards and a touchdown. Patriots running back James White had 12 carries for 31 yards and 2 touchdowns. Now, I had brought this up earlier, but when you look at Tom Brady, he is 42 years old. I mean, if he doesn't win another Super Bowl, I could very easily see him retiring after this year, because in my opinion, he will retire this year if he does not win another Super Bowl. Plain and simple, because, all the punishment that he takes as a quarterback, quarterbacks do take a lot of punishment. They do take some hits, but, if he plays one more year, okay. But I could very easily see him saying, okay, let's, if we don't win a Super Bowl this year, I'm going to be, hanging up the gloves or hanging up the cleats at the end of this year. But I guess you'll never know until the end of the year, until come that time when teams are clinching playoff spots and the Patriots can clinch one, but they don't. If they can get to the playoffs, now I'm saying this. I'm not saying that if the Patriots do not get to a Super Bowl, if they do not get to the playoffs, Tom Brady will retire. I'm saying if they do not get to the Super Bowl, if they can get close to the Super Bowl, but not into it, or if they get into it but they lose, I could see Tom Brady retiring for sure. Because you think about all that and you see that he has a great resume. He went over 1,000 yards rushing for his career. What was it, 500 something passing touchdowns for his career? I feel like he has put a statement on his career, that he is, to many people, and I'm going to say this right now, he is one of the greatest football players of all time, for sure. Aaron Rodgers is up there. He's getting there. But for right now, Tom Brady is the greatest football player of all time. With the guys that he's played with, and having a former Cleveland Browns receiver, with him, Josh Gordon. Gordon played very well last night. He had a couple good catches. He had a touchdown. I'm going to go back on what I said a couple weeks ago when the Browns got rid of him. When they got rid of Gordon. When he was traded to the Patriots, he's going to become an all-pro. He's going to be that superstar that, could have been here in Cleveland. And, you think about that and you see that and you're thinking, well, maybe it's true. Maybe, Gordon just needed different look of scenery. But when you've got, Tom Brady, I'm going to say this again, one of the greatest quarterbacks, or one of the greatest football players of all time, and one of the greatest coaches of all time, and Bill Belichick with you, you're the sky's the limit for you and for how well they play. If the Patriots don't get to the Super Bowl, I feel like it'll be a shock to everybody, like, oh, I guess the Patriots are human. But, we'll never know until come playoff time when teams are clinching and, the playoff bracket is being put together. But as far as the Cleveland Browns are concerned, they'll be going back to the drawing board come the end of this year, and hopefully next year is our year. But it's a lot. You look at all that and you see how good some of these teams are. Look at the Patriots, the Rams, even the Chiefs. You look at all these good teams in the NFL and you see how good they are, and it blows you away to see these teams that have a bad year, and then the following year they're just, I'm going to put this word out there, immaculate. They're just incredible. They're amazing. There's many words to describe it, but I wish the Browns had that kind of turnaround. Going from a bad year to a great year. I mean, but, I mean, if I'm going to say this again, if Greg Williams can turn this team around and they don't have to rehire or hire another head coach, I mean, in my opinion, if there's any position that needs to be filled, I mean, Freddie Kitchens did prove a little bit yesterday that he can run the offense and he can, call good plays. But, if there's any position, if there's any, seat that has not been filled yet, I feel like that's the offensive coordinator spot, only because, if you go out and get a guy like Josh McDaniels to be your offensive coordinator, it's going to be a good year because, he's a young guy. Baker's a young guy. You look at that and you see that tandem and you're thinking, that could be one of the best, up and coming duos, in the NFL. But I mean, if the Browns go after someone, and the guy ends up, getting canned after 2 years, then it was all for nothing. So I feel like the Browns definitely need to think about, what the future looks like for them and how good they want to be. I mean, because I think I know most Browns fans want to see a Super Bowl parade in Cleveland. I mean, I know we all dreamed about the Cavs, about an NBA championship parade in Cleveland, and that came true. So, but hey, if you guys want to keep dreaming, go for it. I mean, I dream the same thing. I dream every single day that the Browns will have a parade in Cleveland, first Super Bowl. But I mean, it's shown that it takes time and it takes a lot of what do I want to call it? A lot of sacrifice, to play well and to be in the National Football League, as Greg Williams put it. This is the NFL. These are teams that are up there and some of the best teams. I mean, you can't say it any other way than that. I mean, you look at Baker and how good granted he did play one college, but, that's college. That's a completely different level to the NFL, because the NFL is that, in my opinion, the NFL is two levels up from from college. I mean, you look at the talent that he faced in college. I mean, he did face some great talent. Heck, he faced Nick Chubb when Nick Chubb was at Georgia when they were in the college football playoff semifinal at the Rose Bowl. I mean, but if Baker can show us that he is the real deal, that he can play at a high level and finish games, because if he can't finish games, then you might as well go look for another quarterback to be behind Drew Stanton. You might as well look for a fourth string quarterback, because if you think about it, I get it, no teams ever have a fourth string quarterback, but if that can help the Browns, great, because you know what? After Drew Stanton, there's really no good quarterback talent on the Browns team, other than, truthfully, there's no good quarterback talent on the Browns after Drew Stanton. So I know, I'm going to say this again, I know that I know teams aren't shown to have a fourth quarterback on their roster, but in the Browns' sake, I feel like they need that, only because, you look at the hits Baker takes and the hits that Tyrod Taylor takes. I mean, in my opinion, they shouldn't even do that. They should just get rid of Drew Stanton and go get someone. Because I know teams won't be offering so much for Drew Stanton, but even if they offer us, a first-round pick, and maybe a second round and maybe a third rounder, great. 2 draft picks. Don't know what kind of picks they'll be, but, who knows? Who knows what will happen with those picks? Those could very easily be a top 10 pick in the first round and a top 10 pick in the third round. Who knows? The Browns definitely need to take more risks. Baker did show that. Yesterday, throwing passes in double coverage, he really didn't throw the ball away into the sideline all that much, which I feel like that's one thing that he definitely needs to work on, is that, if there's nothing available, don't force it in there. Don't force it into, double coverage. I get it, double coverage, the guy did make a good catch, but, if there's nobody open, you throw the ball away. Even college quarterbacks know there's nothing open. You throw the ball away. You don't force it. You don't run it. Some guys will, run the ball a little bit, but, that's very unlikely to. That's very, that's not really. That really doesn't. That's not really. That's not known for. For the NFL quarterbacks to run the ball. Most guys are pocket passers or, they'll throw on the run or they'll do run pass options. I mean, there are a couple of running quarterbacks in the NFL, but there's very few. I can name 2, maybe 3. One being Baker Mayfield, second one being Dak Prescott. But I mean, there are those guys that can run the ball as a quarterback very well, and the one thing I want to see out of the Browns, and I'm gonna say this week after week, I want to see them run some plays with Jabril Peppers on the offensive side of the ball. Run a wildcat with him, because even if it's a double reverse and a pass by Jarvis Landry down the field for a gain of, let's say, 25 yards, that's a gain of 25. That's pretty darn good if you ask me. I mean, they didn't show that, and I think that's one thing that the offense needs to do. And I mean, speaking from a fan's perspective, that's one thing they have to do, because I said this last week. The Browns are running I call it the same old offense. Okay, run play here, pass play here, no trick plays. I mean, look at some of these other teams that are having success. They're running trick plays. They're running those, those double reverses, or maybe a wildcat or this or that. They're not running. They're still running, the run play here, pass play here, but they're not doing that the whole game. They're bringing in a trick play here and there. With the Browns, they're just running the same old offense the entire game. Run play here, pass play here. They're just doing that, which is, I mean, and you ask why they're not winning games, or why they're 2-6-1. There's your perfect explanation right there. They're not running trick plays. They're not taking risks on the offensive side of the ball, other than Baker Mayfield throwing into double coverage. That's it. Because if the Browns were to run those trick plays, the defense wouldn't know what to do. They would be flustered like anything. I mean, that's all part of, I'm going to say this again, it's all part of being a Browns fan, and you got to go through, you got to live through it all and hope for the best, and then there are those words, maybe next year. So, so when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more college football, a little bit more of the NFL, and who knows, we may talk a little Cavs for you. You're listening to the Sports Radio Show here on Lake Effect Radio. And we welcome you back to the Sports Radio Show here on Lake Effect Radio and streaming live at lakeeffectradio.org/studio. I want to go back to. I want to talk a little more about college football. I mean, this is a big week for the teams. There are a couple big games coming up this week. You got Ohio State and Michigan State. It'll be a tough. You look at all these games and you see, these teams and how well they're playing, and let's take a look at this week. So you look at week 11. Starting off. Let's see. Wait a minute. There's a week 10. Yeah, week 11. Okay. So you look at this week and you see a couple good matchups. Louisville at Syracuse, Ohio State and at Michigan State, TCU at West Virginia, Florida State at Notre Dame. That should be a good game. Navy at UCF. That's really, I don't know if that's a test, but South Carolina at Florida, Mississippi State at Alabama. That should be a pretty decent game. Oklahoma State at Oklahoma. You look at Washington State at Colorado. The Saturday night game, the primetime game, it'll be Clemson at Boston College. So there's a team that'll be on edge, trying to get a win and staying unbeaten. So. But you look at all these. I want to talk about these games because, you look at this past week. You had Ohio State beating Nebraska. I feel like the only big game this week or last week was Alabama and LSU. I feel like that was the only big time game that was being played on Saturday. Because you look at the games, last week and. You see a couple of teams, you see, Oklahoma, Texas Tech. That was a pretty decent game. I'll give them that. But, you look at some of these other games, Purdue or Iowa at Purdue, and Purdue beat them. So that was a pretty good game. Notre Dame, Northwestern. That was okay. I call that a good game. West Virginia, Texas. That was, I think that scared everybody with Texas. They played a heck of a game. Talk about scaring the playoff committee. It was that was one game that I did watch, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing with Texas. They play some great football. Talk about comebacks. They made a comeback late in the game, and I feel like everybody thought, Texas is going to get a win, but. You look at that and you see some of these games, Notre Dame beating Northwestern, by 10. You see, Clemson demolishing Louisville 77-16. That, in my opinion, wasn't even a game. You think about that. Georgia beating Kentucky to clinch the SEC East. That was, that had some implications to it. Florida and Missouri. A pretty okay game, but you look at this. You look at the upcoming week, as I said before. Getting closer and closer to the rivalry week, and getting closer to the conference championship games, and we're getting winding slowly but surely winding down college football. I know it's only week 11, but I know it's only going to be week 11, but it's starting to, they're starting to wind down. There's only one game. There's a couple games, in towards the end of the year, but there's only. You look at some of these games. You look at some of the games coming up in December. December 1st, there's a game between East Carolina. That was a game that was canceled because of the hurricane. That game will be played if neither team is in their conference championship game. So if NC State doesn't get to the ACC title game, and East Carolina doesn't get to their conference championship game, that game will be played. You got the Army-Navy game on December 8th, a very special game for everybody. But, other than that, you look at, I'm going to fast forward to week 13 when Ohio State takes on Michigan, but, you look at Notre Dame USC, should be a fantastic game. The Iron Bowl, Auburn at Alabama. You look at South Carolina, Clemson, even. You know, you look at some of these games, you know, later in the year. I mean, you know, in-state rivalries, Kentucky, Louisville, Florida State, Syracuse, Boston College, NC State, North Carolina, Kansas State and Iowa State, Georgia Tech even. I mean, you look at these games, you know, later in the year, and there's some meaning to them. But, you know, the one game I feel like nobody's too keen in on is, what is it? Is it week 12? Yeah, week 12, when Alabama has to take on the Citadel, who's 3-5. That game, in my opinion, I'm going to put a score out there. I know it's not. It's actually, wait a minute. No, it's okay. So it's week 12. Okay. You know, you see that, and I'm going to just put a score out there right now. I'm going to say the score will be 59-0 in favor of Alabama. Because, you know, I get it. You know, they got to include some small schools in there for games. But a team like the Citadel against Alabama, what chance does Alabama have, or what chance does the Citadel have of beating Alabama? I know people are going to say, well, look at Appalachian State a couple years ago beating Michigan. In my opinion, that was luck. That was luck for Appalachian State. Because have we seen them beat any bigger teams since then? I don't believe so. So, I mean, if the Citadel can pull out a win against Alabama, wow, that'll be a statement. But, you know, I feel like even I'm going to say it again, 59-0 Alabama. I'm putting that down because, you know, it's the week before the Iron Bowl. And, you know, that game really shouldn't be a test for Alabama in any way, shape, or form. I mean, there are a couple other big games that people probably will be watching that week. I probably won't watch the Alabama game because it's not going to be a big test for Alabama. I mean, heck, they should have played that game at the beginning of the year. They shouldn't be playing it the week before the Iron Bowl. They shouldn't. Because if you think about it, Alabama's going to be getting ready for Auburn. I mean, and it's been shown that, you know, when Auburn beat Alabama in 2013, I believe Alabama didn't make the national championship game, I believe. But, I mean, you look at that final week and, you know, the playoff committee there could be some sleeper teams, you know, down, you know, like UCF, looking for a playoff spot. And, you know, it'll be tough to see what they can do and what the playoff committee will decide, you know, after, you know, because, you know, I feel like the playoff committee is going to look at what Alabama did against the Citadel because, you know, that's late in the year. That's getting close to, you know, conference championship week and all that. And, you know, to have a game on the schedule like playing against the Citadel, that really isn't a statement game. That really isn't a game that you want the week before a rivalry game against your in-state rival. Because you're going from a team that is 3-5, that's the Citadel, to a team that is, I believe, 6-3, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 6-3. But the record will change, you know, before that game. But, you know, you go from from facing a team that's 3-5 to facing a in-state rival who is 6-3. I feel like whoever made that schedule was, you know, didn't know what to do with the Citadel. In my opinion, schools should play the small schools at the beginning of the year, and then towards the end of the year, they shouldn't be playing any small schools. It should be coming down to crunch time and playing big opponents in big-time games that could prove that they belong in the college football playoff. Because, you know, if that really isn't, I mean, if Alabama loses that game, that'll be a shock to everybody, and you know, the college football playoff committee will look at that and say, wow, they lost to the Citadel. That really didn't, you know, prove something, you know, that another team can hang with Alabama. But, you know, it still does not make sense to me. I'm going to say it again. It does not make sense to me that Alabama has to go in and face the Citadel the week before the Iron Bowl. Because, I mean, I'm going to say it again. You look at the records. You know, I get the records are going to change, you know, the week before that game. But, you know, facing a team like Citadel who's 3-5, and then Alabama having to go into playing at home against Auburn the following week in a basically a do-or-die game, because if Alabama loses that game, who knows where they will be. I mean, it'll be a tough test for them and to see where they can go, with Bama and that. But it'll be a test. So we're actually just about to wrap it up, actually. So I'm Ryan Kirby. Saying thank you for listening, and we hope you join us at 5:00 for the evening edition of The Sports Show. We hope everybody has a great day. Go Lakers, and stay warm.